Welcome to the Achieving Potential podcast. This very first episode is about why competence isn't enough and why some people plateau. Competence is one of the most expensive traps in modern work because we know that competence gets you hired, competence gets you trusted in the workplace. Competence gets you, you become the one that people rely on. And then suddenly competence quietly becomes the reason you stop moving or you stop progressing. And that's not because you're not good. It's usually because the organization starts valuing you for what you produce, not for what you could do and not for what you could lead. So today we're talking about why competence isn't enough and why high performers plateau and what actually separates excellence at work from advancing through work. This episode is for people who feel like this. You find yourself delivering. You're dependable. Your output is strong. It's consistent, measurable. People come to you when things get messy, but your career feels stuck. You watch others progress. Sometimes people you privately think you outperform in your environment, in your division, in the organization. You just watch them go on to the next level and you can't quite explain how they're moving while you just maintain. This is not a character flaw per se, and that's not what we are seeking to do in this episode. It's a systems problem. I am going to work with 3 evidence-based lenses. I'm going to talk about role transition, and skill mismatch. Why the skills that make you successful at one level often don't translate to the next. And this is classic organizational theory. If you think about the Peter Principle and its more nuanced work on leadership capability. The next lens is social and political dynamics at work, not office politics as gossip. That's not what I mean, but real research on the impact of networks and influence. Granovetter talks about weak ties and structural holes and how opportunities actually flow in the workplace. And the third lens is learning loops and identity, why people struggle to change how they operate even when they know what to do. And, you talk about your single loop versus double loop learning and things of that nature. And that growth is often blocked by hidden competing commitments. I'm hoping by the end of this episode, you'll have a clearer diagnosis of why people plateau, feel stuck, and a set of decisions that you can make or take that don't require you to become fake, code switch, become loud, or generally become performative in the workplace. In the first section, I want to posit to you that plateauing is often a role transition problem and not a performance problem per se. So let's start with the most misunderstood part. Many promotions in the workplace are not more of the same. They are a change in job. But organizations often reward the best doer and then assume that the best doer equals the next best level leader. And that's where the Peter Principle, as I referred to earlier, is useful. People are promoted to their level of incompetence. Let me say that again. People are promoted to their level of incompetence. Not because they're foolish, but because the criteria used to promote them is the very thing that stops working at the next level. Here's a practical version. I work in the NHS, and at junior levels, your value is visible. You complete your task, you do what you need to do, you deliver outputs, you fix problems. Outputs is usually the currency, especially at operational levels. However, at a higher level, value becomes less visible. You set direction, you create alignment within the organization, you are trusted or expected to reduce risk before it appears. You're involved in shaping decisions, building capability, and influence outcomes through others. Leverage becomes the currency, not output. So if your entire reputation is built on being the person who gets it done, then your brand is output based. But the next level often requires you to become outcomes-based through other people and working through systems. And this connects some seminal work on seminal work on managerial skills. When we talk about CAT's 3-skill framework, you've got your technical skills, you've got your human skills, and you've got your conceptual skills. Early on, your technical skills dominate in the workplace. However, as you rise, your conceptual and human skills come to the fore. And many people plateau because they keep playing a technical game in a conceptual arena. If you are promoted, you may lose the part of your work that gives you identity and satisfaction, which is the doing. That loss is real. I kid you not. I have been there. Some people don't plateau. They just opt out. And sometimes that's the wise thing to do. But if you want to progress, you must accept that being needed for your output can become too valuable to move. Do you know what I mean? You're the one that flips burgers best. You're very quick at counting. You are very quick at producing that report. You've become very, very efficient. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes the organization doesn't promote you because promoting you creates a hole they can't fill. In the next section, I want to talk about good work not being the same as visible value. In a well-functioning system or organization, output should speak for itself. However, in real systems, output doesn't speak. It gets interpreted. This is where people get frustrated and they think if my work is excellent, surely it will be seen. But being seen is not a passive process. It's a social process. If you know what I mean, it's a social process. You need other people who see you, vouch for you, and talk about you when you're not in the room. So let's translate that into workplace reality. I'm saying that people who progress often do at least one of these things. They are known outside of their immediate team. These are people that work across boundaries. They are part of conversations where priorities get set. They become a safe pair of hands for leaders' problems, not just operational tasks. And I'm not suggesting that you suck up to your leaders, but it's about the proximity principle. It's about proximity to decision making. Most high performers who have found themselves plateauing or becoming stuck, they're often brilliant inside their bubble. They are indispensable within their team, but they are not known beyond. So that value is very local. And promotions are very rarely local decisions. They're often comparative, they're political and cross-functional. Now, the trade-off is that visibility for some people, depending on your personality type, can feel distasteful, especially if you equate what you need to do with self-promotion. But there is a difference between self-promotion and making your work legible, making your work seen. Don't promote yourself would be my advice. You need to promote the problem. That's something you need to learn to do. Promote the problem, promote the stakes, promote the approach, promote the outcome. However, you need to let your role in that process be very clear. And this aligns with what good executives do. They create a shared understanding of the problem. They create a shared understanding of the approach to the problem and the outcome. If leaders cannot quickly explain what you do and why it matters within an organization, they can't advocate for you in rooms when you're not there. Okay, let that sink in. So, plateau is frequently caused, in my opinion, when learning stops. So let's talk about development. At some point in your career, you stop learning by accident and you have to start learning on purpose. Anders Ericsson's work on deliberate practice is useful here, not because work is a sport, but because it distinguishes repetition from improvement. A lot of professionals repeat what they are already good at. They gain years of experience, but it's 1 year. You're repeating it 10 times, 15 times, 20 times. But deliberate practice requires having specific goals, having feedback, and being comfortable with discomfort and your capacity for adjustment. The workplace rewards fluency and they punish clumsiness. So people avoid putting themselves in these learning zones where they become uncomfortable and they need to adjust because they feel that their reputation gets threatened. What this does is create a pattern where you stay where you're competent, you avoid tasks that make you look slow and foolish and indecisive, and you then double down on what you do well already. And this is how your plateau becomes permanent. Plateaued professionals often do single loop learning. I'll get better at my tasks. However, people that advance do double loop learning. Maybe the tasks that I'm excellent at aren't the tasks that create leverage. And sometimes that double loop learning can feel like identity loss. You are no longer the expert. You've become the learner again. And that threatens your ego, your status, and your comfort. But the uncomfortable truth, if you want to hear it, some people plateau and are stuck because competence becomes their identity and growth would require them to look ordinary for a while. The hidden psychological contract that keeps you stuck is that sometimes you don't progress because you are not fully aligned with progressing. This is something referred to as immunity to change. You say you want to change, but there's a hidden commitment to staying safe. You say you want promotion, but you're also committed to avoiding conflict. You don't want visibility. You are scared of rejection. So maintaining your reputation as a competent person becomes all too important, and you don't want to be judged publicly. So what do? Unconsciously, you avoid those behaviors that would put you into contention. Owning ambiguous problems in the organization, speaking up in meetings, being able to disagree respectfully, and taking calculated risks. And sometimes even asking for sponsorship within the organization. This isn't a weakness, it's normal human protection. However, it's costly. If you're going to wait until you're 100% ready, you're probably using readiness as a shield, as an excuse. When you step into higher level work, you will be misunderstood more often. You will have less control. And in fact, you'll have fewer wins. And that can be deeply uncomfortable for people who have built their success based on precision. The ladder is not only about ability, it's also about tolerance. You have to have a degree of tolerance for ambiguity, exposure, and conflict. And this is where you need a shift in your perspective. This changes everything. Career progression is not a reward for competence. It's a selection for leverage. Competence is necessary, yes, but leverage is decisive. Leverage means your impact is compounded through your network, through people, through systems, through decisions, relationships, and the timing. So the question I hear you ask is, how can I improve or how can I prove I'm competent? The question I'll ask you back is, where can I create disproportionate value that leaders can recognize, trust, and repeat within my organization? And this is where people who are less competent are able to progress because they are positioned where the leverage is visible. They make decisions, they just don't deliver on tasks. They build networks, not just outputs, and they support leaders to translate complexity and reduce uncertainty. Now that's leverage. You may dislike the reality of this and still choose to operate intelligently within it, but that's the truth. Some practical takeaways for you. I think the first one is you need to be able to diagnose your plateau type. Ask yourself, which one is most through? Is there a skills mismatch? Am I still operating with a doer skill in a leader arena? Is there a visibility gap? Is my value local and not legible or seen across the organization? Have I stalled in my learning? Am I repeating competence and not building new capabilities? Have I got a safety contract, where I want to progress, but I don't want the discomfort it requires? You need to pick one. You can't pick all four because one of these is usually dominant. The second takeaway is you need to shift from output to outcomes. So once a week, for example, describe your work from an outcomes point of view. What changed because of what I did? What risk is reduced because of what I've done? Which decision has become easier? What capacity has increased? If you can't answer those questions, then you're trapped in the doer language, in the task language. Okay? The third takeaway, you need to build at least one cross-boundary link per month. Let me repeat that. Every month, you must try and build one cross-boundary link because opportunities travel through weak ties. So these are loosely held relationships across the organization. Those provide opportunities. So once a month, build a relationship outside your immediate area. So if you're in surgery, corporate services, estates, digital, these are all areas outside of your immediate area. Make friends with a peer in another team. Make friends and develop a relationship with a leader who is 2 levels up from you or someone in a related function. It's not really networking. Maybe you could call it that, but it's also linking. Okay? That's what you do. You have to build one cross-boundary link or relationship per month. The fourth takeaway, you need to start practicing executive translation because leaders value people who can translate messy detail into clear choices. They can translate risk into options. They translate effort into outcomes. In meetings where you find yourself with leaders, aim to say something that clarifies the topic that is being discussed. For example, what we're deciding is, or you say the trade-off is, or the risk if we don't act is, etc., etc. Those are the sort of things you need to start being able to talk about and translate executive language. The fifth takeaway is to decide what you're willing to lose because progression often requires losing at least one comfort. Being the expert, being liked by everyone, controlling the work you do, being the hero who fixes everything. If you're not willing to lose anything, you're not actually choosing growth. So in closing, I'm going to say this to you. If you find that you are plateauing, if you find that you are stuck and you don't need more shame, you need a better map. Competence is still valuable. It's something I would advise you to keep, but don't die on that hill. Don't worship it because your life can quietly shrink around what you are good at. Your career can stall, not because you failed, but because you never made the shift from being excellent at work to being valuable through work. If this episode landed with you, don't rush to change everything. Just choose one lever: visibility, leverage, learning, or a tolerance for discomfort. Opportunity gaps don't close by motivation, they close by strategy. Applied patiently without self-betrayal. Thank you for listening.